T-minus 60 seconds and counting. We passed T-minus 60. 55 seconds and counting. Neil Armstrong just reported back. It's been a real smooth countdown. We passed the 50-second mark. Power transfer is complete. We're on internal power with the launch vehicle at this time. 40 seconds away from the Apollo 11 liftoff. All the second stage tanks now pressurized. 35 seconds and counting. We are still go with Apollo 11. 30 seconds and counting. Astronauts report it feels good. T-minus 25 seconds. 20 seconds and counting. T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence starts. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. We have a liftoff, 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11. Power clear.
Hello and welcome to this late night from the bullpen with me, James Roy, and third coach Tom Chavarria is here with me. We're here to bring some smooth Texans talk to your late night listening ears. I was trying to find a way to spin. I don't know. I feel like a late night DJ. And then up next we'll have some 12 hours of Kenny G to soothe you into sleep. But no, there's nothing sleepy about this. We're going to be talking about the Texans draft class. This is our first live since the Texans drafted. I did throw up a short video. We meant to record sooner. I was going through a bit of a health thing, but I'm all good now. So here we are. Tom, how are you doing today?
I'm pretty good. I'd be better if the Stros would have got it done. I'd be even more better if Monterey decided to play in the Conca Champions, but I digress. All my sports teams can't win. I believe my Texans won, so we are good there.
All right, sweet. We got hello from the Rio Grande Valley. We've got someone who loves Kenny G, and we've got our first question, which is that last week we were asked about a trade package to send Davis Mills away, and this particular user forgot that Tim Boyle existed and is asking how good Tim Boyle is as a quarterback. I'll tell you this. I think Taylor Swift did say it best in the same way that you did. I kind of forgot that Tim Boyle existed too until I saw a graphic this week on Instagram that listed him as a quarterback that somehow is still on the Texans roster in some capacity. So I think Davis Mills is a far better option as a backup quarterback than Tim Boyle is. Tom, I'll let you tackle this one as well.
I'm with you. I didn't know he was a thing. I'm not looking forward to any scenario in which Tim Boyle is the quarterback of the Houston Texans. I'm not looking forward to any scenario in which Tim Boyle is the backup quarterback to the Houston Texans. To steal your quote, to steal your thunder, we don't practice effed up. To steal, who was it? Gruden? Yeah, Gruden's quote. So I'm really not concerned with who the backup is. You want him to have some experience or maybe be a young guy that you could develop. But hopefully we're talking about plenty of CJ Stroud next season.
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, I agree with you. I don't like thinking about the backup quarterback situation outside of I said it last year when we had to sit CJ due to injury that the biggest reason it made sense to start Davis Mills outside of the fact that he's the younger guy that you've been touting on the depth chart as your backup quarterback is that if he does well, his trade value goes up and that opportunity is out the window. But let's move in first. Go Birds. Which ones? You're not the only birds in the whole
So
NFL,
many birds.
So I don't know why you're just dropping a Go Birds like I'm supposed to know which exact team you're saying, although I think I do. But this isn't a Go Birds podcast. This is a Go Texans podcast. So let's talk about the Texans draft. We'll just start from the top. I want to know, before we get into the picks, what was your favorite pick? Just over the whole draft, understanding what you wanted them to do, which pick was like, that's the one. I like that guy.
Honestly, I mean, it's going to seem kind of lame because it was like the first pick, but Kamar Lassiter just seems like the more I got to see him, the more I was like, I love this guy. Like I don't care about his speed issues. I care about his ability to ball hawk, his ability to just be an absolute terror on defense. And you just see the passion that he plays with. And the more I got to know him, the more I was like, wow. I was disappointed at the pick at first because of all the talent that just came off the board before him. And then the more and more I got to see him, obviously coming from big school, I was just like, okay, let's ride. In Caserio, we trust.
There's a lot of fans that expected the Texans to go defensive tackle in that round. And to their credit, Nick Caserio did say that in the second and third round, there was points where they considered taking a defensive tackle, but at each point there was runs at the position that took away their options. They didn't make the move quick enough to trade up, or however it went down, they didn't end up going defensive tackle there. But I mean, I agree with you. We do have a question from the audience, which is that what do we think of the cornerback rotation? And so I'll kind of get into that. It seems very heavily implied by Nick Caserio's comments after the fact that they view Kamari Lassiter as a nickel. I think that in the interests of team building and development and just wanting the best possible result, that the Texans would want to see him contend for outside corner, simply because if it's Okudah or Henderson, you're looking at a guy that's on a 1-year deal that if he does well, not coming back. If he doesn't do well, probably not coming back. So it just seems like a lose-lose to have anyone but Kamari Lassiter fill the outside corner. Kamari Lassiter was one of the picks that I really liked a lot. Early on when we were doing Mock Draft Mondays as a podcast, in my first one, I looked at his scouting report. I said, I don't know enough about him. Can't really put him on my mock draft. The very next week I picked him. And I've been familiar with him as a prospect. For those of you who don't follow me, I've interacted. I don't want to say interacted on Instagram with him because that's a stretch. He liked one of my videos that had Derek Stingley in it, and I was like, dang, Kamari Lassiter at 42, and then it happened. So if you want to know what the Texans are doing, just look for me to say it, because then it might happen. Not because I believe it's going to happen, but because I joked about it, and then it happened. But my favorite picks in the draft probably happened really late. I mean, I like Kalen Bullock. I thought that I like his attitude, but if I'm looking at two players that I really like for the way they fill needs and for the way that they've interacted with fans and the team and just the way they've been on social media and just in videos since the draft, it's probably Jawar Jordan and Marcus Harris. Jawar Jordan, because of how he is as a person, I'm looking at highlights. I like what he is as a running back. I think he definitely has a place on this team if he can perform to that level at the pro level. And then Marcus Harris, because he's all SEC defensive tackle picked in the 7th round. So the Texans got great value at the very least, and a guy who can probably outperform his draft value pretty quickly if he plays his cards right. Now, before we'll go, I guess we'll go pick by pick. Now, we've already talked about Kamari Lassiter, so my next question is associated with the next pick. We'll just go through it. We'll just walk right through. The next pick in the draft is Blake Fisher, an offensive tackle. We had people like John Crumpler, who we asked how he felt about the Texans taking offensive linemen, and he said, I've not reviewed any film on offensive linemen. I don't believe the Texans are even considering it. There are people like you and I or at least me, who thought, maybe in the 4th round you start to look and you get an offensive tackle. Maybe in the 3rd round you go for a guard. A guard would probably be more of a need. But the Texans ended up going with Blake Harris in the 2nd round. It's a head-scratching move if you don't think about it and you just look at it at face value and you're a fan who doesn't like, because it's not. How do you say it, Tom? You said it's not a sexy pick. It's not the move that like people wanted the Texans to do, but it is something that if you look at the depth chart and if you look at the problems the Texans had, makes sense. I think that it's a move that could benefit them now and will benefit them in the future. But how do you feel about it?
I just really don't see necessarily the backlash that it's getting. Like we talk about the health concerns of Titus Howard and Laramie Tunsil. We talked about him heavily. Those guys were a mash unit. So you just brought a young guy in to be a swing tackle that you can give these guys, some maybe not take all the reps, but okay, maybe they get 10, 15, 20 reps a game, whatever. And now you keep all those guys fresh. We just learned not too long ago that Laremy Tunsil had a knee scope or some kind of cleaning up of the knee, something like that. So he's getting up there in age. He's your prize pick. Now, I understand what a lot of people in the sports talk radio locally are saying, that you didn't address guard, you didn't address center, you didn't address whatever isn't Juice Scruggs. So you technically still have a hole to that. I feel like Kenyon Green is supposed to be that guy. I think they're going to give him every opportunity to be that guy. So for me, what the Fisher pick looks like is great depth, because he's super young. He's this huge body that can learn from two good tackles, play either side, and if one of them gets hurt, he's ready to go. If one of them leaves via trade or free agency or whatever, then you still have a young guy that you can build with. So
100% it's insurance. I agree with you. I mean, I look at it as this and so you spoke to the health concerns. I'm actually composing a thread series on the Texans, breaking down position groups. It's called State of the Texans Positional Breakdowns. I'm starting with the O-line, so I'm pretty deep in the books. And by deep in the books, I mean I've done a Google search or two and looked at Pro Football Reference a couple times. For those of you who want me to say that I've done a lot of research, yeah, sure, that is the research I did. But that's all I needed to look at to know this. I think that the injury concerns for Laremy Tunsil are a little played out. The only season he hasn't played at least 14 games in is 2021, where he missed most of the season, pretty much all of the season. But outside of that, I'd say a left tackle that plays at least 14 games a season. And this past season, he played 14 games, so there was 3 games that he missed. With that in mind, I think that's acceptable. I think that's I would say the bare minimum. I'm looking at that and I'm going, okay, we're getting the bare minimum from an elite left tackle. So CJ Stroud's protected, and that's what a swing tackle is for. That's what it can step in and play a couple games, but we don't want to see them play too many. Charlie Heck, even Blake Fisher to this point, as far as we know, is a guy we might only want to see for a game or two, right? So we look at Titus Howard now. The health concerns are slightly more legitimate. He had a season-ending injury in his rookie season and this most recent season. But once again, the other 3 seasons he's been in the league, he's been reliable to play at least 14 games. And so I think the biggest issue, as we've aired this out 100 times, is that Titus Howard's been asked to play left guard. He's capable of it. Is he amazing at it? Is it what he's being paid to do? No. But is he doing it because he's a team player and he's the guy who wants the Texans to do well? And if the Texans believe that that's the best position for him to play for the team to be successful, do it? Yes. So Titus Howard is clearly, I believe, who this pick is targeted at. They want Blake Fisher as insurance for him. But I think when Titus Howard stays healthy and plays right tackle, we will find that Blake Fisher is going to be waiting in the Raptors until either his contract's up or until it comes time to replace one of those 2 guys when they inevitably leave the team. I like both. I like Laremy Tunsil and Titus Howard are both guys that have, I don't have any problem with them. I think they're cool people, and I think they do their job really well. So I don't know. Do you have anything to say to that before we move into the next pick?
I really hope that it's not a concern. You know what I mean? The big fear here with this pick, in my mind, is the Texans have an injury at guard or at center, and now you have no depth there. And you say, well, we got 3 tackles. And then you have a disgruntled Titus Howard that you asked to move inside. He seems very adamant that he only wants to play right tackle, and that's it. I'm sure he'd probably play left tackle if he was asked to, but I think he only wants to play tackle. And you run the risk of, okay, if I get somebody hurt and I need somebody, well, hey, Titus, can you do it? And then now he's like, well, I'm not going to play. I'm going to hold out, whatever the case may be. You really hope that doesn't happen. If not, then this looks like, if everything else lines up and all the depth is there, it looks like a phenomenal pick. And you're just building on strength, best available guy. It's what we wanted them to do.
No, yeah, and this is the first time I've said this out loud because I'm reading the chat. But Houston Stressins, I believe I'm saying that correctly, is in the chat. What a fine Twitter account! If you're not
He's
following them
awesome.
on Twitter, gotta give them a follow. Fast
Stressing or
rising
blessing.
Twitter account, stressing or blessing, always blessing. It's a blessing day to be a Texans fan. In the chat we have. I don't watch college football, but I watched the draft, and I believe it was a solid draft. But is the lineman we got as good as people have been saying? I'll tell you this, I'm just going on college reputation. I mean, I think Notre Dame puts out solid linemen. That's all I got. I can't tell you that I watched every Fighting Irish game. I don't have as far as I know, I don't have a lot of Irish blood in me, and I also my dad is U.S. Naval Academy alumni, so I don't have much love, and my wife is her dad's USC alumni, so I just don't have much love for Notre Dame as a school. But I honestly I didn't know where Notre Dame was. That's a whole nother topic, but I'm out myself on a lot of things now, and I've already had those discussions out. Thanks for blessing up Houston Stressins. Um, but one thing I wanted to bring up was you brought it up as far as depth at guard goes. So in the event that Titus Howard has to go down to guard, a lot would have to happen, which is what happened this past season. Because if you look at guard right now, right, I'm looking at the depth chart. Left guard Kenyon Green is 100% LG1 until further notice. And then behind him is Kendrick Green. We got K Green squared. And then on the other side, you have Shaq Mason, who's been a pillar of consistency. And then Jarrett Patterson can get back up to center and guard, or you can say that Kendrick Green is also the right guard backup. There's other guards on the depth chart. I'm just not super familiar with them at the moment. But the event the amount of injuries that would have to take place for Titus Howard to need to shift from right tackle inside so that Blake Fisher could play right tackle, because he did not play guard in college, and it would probably be better that way. I'm just not. If that happens, we have other problems going on. So I don't know. But anything else to say about this offensive lineman pick before we move on to the third round?
I liked it. I thought it was a great pick for depth, and it was everything they said about this kid. He grades out to be a fantastic tackle prospect. So to get him in the second round was good. Oh, and by the way, the guy to his left, to his right, Alt was like a top 10 pick. So clearly that line was good.
Clearly. But anyway, looking into the next round, in the third round, the Texans, speaking of USC, got a player named Kalen Bullock. And I had made a joke that the Bears are such a poorly run organization that they might send a new intern that's never watched football up to make the pick and say, "Hey, go get Caleb," and then end up picking Kalen Bullock number one overall. And then the Texans went and grabbed Kalen Bullock in the third round. Another way that I've somehow affected the Texans draft decisions. You're welcome, because Kalen Bullock is a dog. He's a guy, several interceptions. Bird, Solomon Bird affected some of those. We picked him up in the 7th. We'll talk about him later, but just a ball hawk, plays free safety. And that's what I want to talk about. I'd like to get your feelings on the pick, but my specific question to you is that I feel like now I feel like it's maybe 60-40 split. There was Texans fans that were like, we need to address safety because Jalen Petrie cannot have as bad a year as he did last year, and us not have a solution to replace him if that happens. And then there's another contingent that was like, Jimmy Ward can't stay on the field. We need safety depth because of that. I fell in the former, and you may have fallen in the latter. But how do you? So they drafted a free safety, which in my mind means they're looking at depth behind Jimmy Ward. Do you think that they may be looking to shift Jimmy Ward to nickel? How do you feel about that situation as a whole and the pick?
It's really interesting that you pointed out the whole nickel thing, because they've already talked about whether or not Jimmy would be willing, and Jimmy's already said, "Hey, I am not opposed to playing nickel. I'm just this is what I am." I think Jimmy's the ultimate team player, and if they ask him to, he will. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out, spring training, that sort of thing. I really think that they hope that he can play either safety positions. The one thing I question in looking at him, and the one thing I feel that Nick Casario pointed out was that he's a little small. He needs to get stronger. And when you look at him, he's not the strongest looking guy. He's kind of a slender dude. So to kind of just stick your nose in there and go tackle. Now, all his film looked great, but I just wonder if, he's not going to be somebody that you're going to see in the box, strictly coverage, and then maybe you only get him on passing downs.
Well, I'll tell you, I would appreciate that so much considering, right? Jalen Petrie in his rookie season, I think a lot of the reason that he got the hype he did, and it's a good thing, is that he's a box safety. He gets in there and he gets after it. But if he's asked to go in coverage, there's times where it kind of looks like he's guessing. And so the ball knowledge and a lot of the scouting report read that's the opposite with Kalen Bullock. Kalen Bullock there's film of him playing screens and run really well, but his primary thing is pass coverage, which is what the Texans would need at that position if they're looking to help, Jalen Petrie out. But with Jimmy Ward, so there had previously been, and I'd like, because I personally fell into this when I saw the news, or not the news, but there was a lot of people immediately that were like, Kalen Bullock's going to be starting free safety and Jimmy Ward's going to bump down to nickel. Now, whether or not that's true, sure. I mean, you can debate that. That's up for the Texans to decide this offseason. But assuming that's true, you go, James, Jimmy Ward literally didn't want to be in San Francisco because they used him as a nickel. So why would he want to play nickel for the Texans? First off, he did play nickel for the Texans almost as much as he played safety, right? Free safety. So there's that. That was pointed out to me after I made the tweet that I did. But if you look at it, Jimmy Ward, right before he signed or right after he signed with the Texans, is quoted as saying he never said he didn't want to play nickel. He said he hounded the 49ers and asked them a lot of times to play nickel, and then they said no, and he wanted to get the reps in and be prepared for it. And then during the season, their primary nickel cornerback went down, and they were like, hey, Jimmy, we've got a really good backup at your position, but we don't have a really good backup nickel cornerback. So would you like to go down and play that? And he did it because he's a team player, but he was frustrated because he was not well prepared to be in that position. And so that is the timeline for anyone who was confused on that, because I was definitely someone who had to read back. I did some Googling on that to make sure that I had that up to date. But that means that it's certainly feasible that this draft was meant to give, play into Jimmy Ward's flexibility, bring him down. Because I'll tell you what, if Jimmy Ward's playing nickel and he goes down injured, I feel a lot better about the depth at that position than I do about the depth at safety. But, Kalen Bullock is a boomer bust prospect. He's not like a sure thing. He's a third-round pick. I like him, and I like what I've seen, and there's potential there, but we're not going to see him. Obviously, we saw Jalen Petrie as a second-round pick step up and be a really serviceable starting safety right away. But are we going to see that from Kalen Bullock? That I don't know. I'm not fully sure. It's certainly more likely than, say, a fifth-round pick or later. But I mean, is it the thing? I don't know. How would you like to see them play through that? I mean, do you think that it's better to keep Jimmy Ward up at free safety till he just gets injured or until he doesn't?
I believe, along with the lines of what you just said, wherever he feels most comfortable is probably where they should play him. I think that right now, when you look at this roster and how it's constructed, I don't think you have to force anybody out of position because you have any glaring holes. We just talked about the potential for Kamari Lassiter to play nickel. So if that's the case, well, then you don't have to move Jimmy down or out, and you can keep him in his natural position. The thing for me is that everything they picked was all about solid depth in different places, provided that you needed it. I don't think that they had to have anybody that they drafted to plug in and start right away. So it's going to be interesting to see how much run, if at all, they get. Barring any injuries, a lot of these guys are just going to be, swing or the fifth corner or whatever. I don't see Kamari coming in day one and gaining an outside role or whatever. I really do think that they expect big things out of Jeff Okudah. I really think they expect big things out of CJ Henderson. I don't think those were guys that were just filler. I think they were legitimately picked to start.
And I think that's what people, I'm glad you put it that way, because I think that's what people did. They saw them, and sure, there were top 10 picks in their day, but they're on 1-year deals now, and it's just you see a bunch of corners get signed. And people, I mean, almost forgot about Miles Bridges. Is that the other corner that the Texans signed from New England? Someone will correct me in the comments. I'm almost certain, but I mean, they signed a lot of cornerbacks. So there was a contingent of people that were like, the Texans don't need to draft a corner. They have so many, and then there's a contingent that are like, the Texans need a corner. They didn't pick up a starting caliber corner. And so I think that they made the right move, and I think that regardless of how Kamari Lassiter is used, he'll probably show to be flexible one way or the other. But I mean, we haven't even mentioned Kamari Lassiter's 40 time, but I mean, I'm not super worried about it. Who ran a slower 40 time that was a pretty good starting corner in the league for a while was Rondé Barber. Rondé Barber's 40 time is a 4.68, almost a 4.7. Jeez. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I feel pretty good about it. There's people in the comments asking about the availability of Justin Simmons. It's Miles Bryant. There we go. Okay, thanks. I was stressing, but now I'm blessed. All right. So Justin Simmons, I mean, I'm all for adding another veteran safety, especially depending on how you view MJ Stewart. But the Texans would have to cut some people. Nick Caserio said there are cuts inbound. I don't have any names off the top of my head that have any legitimate wind behind them to be primary cut candidates, but the Texans certainly have the cap space to make a move at safety. Excuse me. Let's see. Agreed, Nick Caserio. To work throughout the offseason, known to pick up released players and fill them into major roles. We saw him do it with Blake Cashman. So, why not? The big thing with that is that not all of them are going to hit. And like I said earlier, a lot of those guys he picked up 1-year deals, 1 year. We thought we were going to get rid of 1-year Nick. 1-year Nick. He's like 1 year here, 1 year there. It's like he's got all this time, this like lifetime to spend, and he's just like, I don't want to spend too much of it in one place. He's just shuffling out the 1-year deals, and it has meaning to it. I mean, when you look at what he's been able to do, it's always been finding veteran talent that needs to prove itself and getting that 1 year out of them, setting them up, being a team-friendly organization, setting them up to be able to get that big deal elsewhere. And then once you have the cap space and you find the guy you want, making that move, right? So the Texans have done a really good job of that. And yeah, it's pretty exciting stuff. Underrated, undrafted free agent signing, Max Tooley, the BYU linebacker, depth and special teams impact player. We'll talk about undrafted free agents later in the show, but let's move into the next pick. So this one's a pretty exciting pick. It was a sketchy pick if you get what I'm saying. What's up, brother? But Cade Stover out of Ohio State in the 4th round, and also the way the Texans went. The Texans, it's so Nick Caserio to do this. You have the 123rd pick entering the draft. You trade it to move up to get Kalen Bullock, and then you trade up from the 127th pick to the 123rd pick in order. You're just shuffling picks over to the Eagles to move up and pick players, and if there was ever anything that was more that screamed, I'm Nick Caserio and it is draft day, that this move to pick up Cade Stover is it. How do you feel about it? So we've talked about it. You and me have both been on the same page of this, where the Texans are best player available. It's all depth outside of maybe Kamari Lassiter. They can go out and take risks, get players that can develop into potential, good players. So tight end was not necessarily a primary need for the team, but they went out and got Cade Stover, who is a really good tight end and has a lot of chemistry with C.J. Stroud. How do you feel this affects the landscape in the tight end room for the Texans?
I really wonder what it does from the aspect of there's no secret that that's CJ's guy. You know what I mean? I really wonder how fast Cade Stover moves into a position where now he's seeing more of the snaps than, some of the other guys. And for me, I don't necessarily mind it because we just talked about it. They're great together. And we've seen when CJ gets his guy, they do good things. So the fact that he tweeted out immediately after, or maybe it was on IG, where he's like, my two favorite people, you know, Sketch and Stover, and he was just so excited. Clearly they're probably going to find a way to get him involved, and I I don't know, like I don't mind it, but I'm sure there's some people that are going to be upset when he's on the field and someone's not.
Yeah, I can see it. I mean, I just think the biggest thing that, and I've talked about it, and Cade Stover's talked about it himself personally at the combine because it's a topic that's come up, is it at least as regards to himself. But the Texans, the biggest thing people looked at for the Texans after the season was, hey, if they're gonna add a tight end, they need to add a tight end who can block because Dalton Schultz and Brevin Jordan can't block allegedly. I'm going to go ahead and throw the Squirrely Dan quote out there. Allegedly, okay? Because I don't know if I 100% believe that. But so you get a Cade Stover who has those allegations on the table as well. And he at the combine was like, yeah, people have said that, but I don't know if I believe that. And I was like, my man, I agree with you. So, I mean, I think it's important that they develop their run blocking ability. I like the pick of Cade Stover because, worst case scenario, right? If we go worst case, Cade doesn't really make an impact in 2024. And then at the end of the year, Brevin Jordan has had a career year, and it comes down to it. He can decide, to stay in Houston or he can go somewhere else because the contract's up at the end of the year. And the Texans are probably not. I don't mean this in a bad. I feel like this is going to sound bad, but the Texans are not exactly pounding the table. Like Brevin, please stay with us. We need you. It's nice to have three really good tight ends, but at the end of the day, if at the end of the year Cade Stover hasn't made a contribution and then Brevin Jordan leaves, guess what you have? You have two tight ends that have chemistry with C.J. Stroud and know the system and have been in it for at least a year. So I just don't see, like, going into 2020, it's a 2025 pick at worst. At best, Cade Stover immediately demands target share, and we got three tight ends that, on paper don't look good because they're each getting their share of the targets because they all demand play time. But overall, really love the pick. Love the pick. And
I
that
totally
brings us.
disagree
Oh,
about
1 minute.
Go ahead.
Go, let's hear it. What do you got?
I totally disagree that Brevin Jordan has a career year. With this pick, Brevin Jordan is probably on very, very thin ice. Jacob in the chat is like, definitely tied into. I totally believe it. When you look at the personnel groupings, how on earth are you going to find room for Brevin Jordan on this team? And for me, I feel like Cade has already been the most willing blocker, right? And came out and said, I'll block and do all these things. I feel like you're going to see Cade before you see Brevin sooner rather than later. And the only thing that changes that for me is if somebody gets hurt. If somebody gets hurt,
Well,
then obviously
I said worst case scenario. So that was worst case for Cade is like, oh, Brevin Jordan has a career year.
Oh, I thought you meant worse for Brevin. My bad.
No. So
Yeah.
Brevin Jordan, I'm not of the volition that Brevin Jordan does that, right? But I mean, it's hard to ignore after all this time of him kind of underachieving relative, coming out of college. Everyone was like, "Oh, Brevin Jordan out of Miami, you got that tight end? Wow, Nick is cooking." That was one of the first times we saw the Nick can cook, and then we watched everyone go, "Who brought in this tight end? Nick Caserio? Does he even know what he's doing there? Fire the GM." That cycle of like circular, this guy, I love the pick. Can't, okay. So we've seen that happen before, but this past season, it's hard to ignore what Brevin Jordan's been able to do and how his skill set has flourished in this offense. So I agree that Cade Stover is going to make it hard on Brevin to get that play time. I'm not necessarily in the Cade Stover as tight end 2 camp yet. I mean, I don't know. Maybe watching the Ohio State highlights, it's hard to see Cade Stover not seeing the field. That is what I'll say. So I mean, like I said, love the pick. I 100% believe that he's going to see the field in some capacity. And you bring up a valid point, which is that the amount of times Texans will run more than one tight end on the field is already going to be exceptionally low. And if they're doing that, they're probably looking to run. And if they're looking to run, they're probably looking to have Cade Stover on the field. They probably saw something in college that makes them believe that he's probably a little better at blocking than at least one of the tight ends they have. So we'll see. And you don't want to pull Schultz. That's a dead giveaway that they're probably not going to throw the ball. But anyway, I love the pick. Love the pick. Do you have anything more to say? I don't want to move on before we get all our words out.
No, no, I love the pick, but one thing I've noticed so far in this whole thing is that CJ, like Stressens is talking about, they've gone out of their way to please CJ and kind of build with him in mind. I can't see a scenario where Stover just shows up and doesn't end up to figure in some capacity. Maybe it's only like 8 or 10 plays a game, and then the first time he makes a play, then it starts to eat more. And I just imagine he's going to see the field a lot more than we think.
No, yeah. We got from the chat, Kateriano gone. And that was the big
Tegan
thing,
who?
is that TQ could make the roster, right? Some teams carry four. And four tight ends are nice to have, considering there is a set where you could have three tight ends on the field and you don't want to not have that. But Andrew Beck could figure as that fourth because he's the fullback and he could technically count as that fourth tight end. So, yeah, overall, all these guys we've been bringing in, like Eric Saubert, and I can't even name half of them that have been playing like third and fourth string tight end. You can consider their chances of making the roster significantly compromised, if not zero. But the next pick the Texans made was not until the 6th round. They didn't have a 5th round pick. They didn't bother to make an attempt to get into the 5th round. And that pick, as we know well, speaking to the Texans' needs this past season, I said that linebacker was, and can Stover play H-back role too? Yes. And that was something someone brought up as him being the next coming of Owen Daniels. He's literally the first tight end the Texans have had on the roster since Owen Daniels that could potentially fill a similar role to him, which is exciting. The next pick was linebacker, and that was something that I said was the number one need for the team, understanding that I believed that the team didn't really need to specifically address all these needs that people said the Texans had. If they left some of them off the board, I would have been like, okay, cool. Nick said it best. The team was ready to play this season before the draft started. So, I mean, anything they added in the draft was icing on the cake. But they added Jamal Hill a lot, and that was a linebacker that they had scouted heavily and they had meetings with. So it should come as no surprise that they went with him. Hadn't seen a lot of the film on him, but I like the idea of bringing in a linebacker. Someone who's young and has something to prove is definitely better than a Del'Shawn Phillips or whatever other random linebackers we've signed this offseason. The depth chart is rather unremarkable once you get past To'oto'o's name. Maybe Neville Hewitt, because I know who he is. But yeah, so I'm excited about the pick. How do you feel about this linebacker pickup with Jamal Hill?
I mean, any linebacker tied to the Texans allowed to be coached by DeMeco Ryans, I feel good about, because that's his bread and butter. You've seen what he's done with Christian Harris. You feel like if they scouted up a guy, obviously DeMeco's looked at this guy with his lens and goes, oh yeah, that's a guy I can mold. So the minute the name was read, I was like, okay, he's going to be good, because I feel like DeMeco just gets the best out of that group because he's coming from a place, like he relates to them so well. You talk about Blake Cashman. Blake Cashman was really not anybody till DeMeco got his hands on him. So now he's out here making big time money. Christian Harris, while good Alabama product, I don't think anybody saw him in this light. And now you look and it seems like any linebacker for me is just going to play better under DeMeco Ryans. So I look forward to seeing him in the rotation, making big plays at some point this season.
The defensive picks for me, just in general, it's like who wouldn't want to develop in DeMeco's defense? So it's a solid pick for me. And especially like once you get to the 6th and 7th round, I'll probably say this 100 times throughout the rest of the podcast, but if all Jamal Hill does is play special teams and do it well, then like that's a win. It's a dub. That's like what he's being brought on at this pick to do. So anything, if he gets a start or if he plays in the rotation at linebacker this season, that's above and beyond what's expected of him. And so, I mean, I like the pick because, like everyone has said, the chat, you, now me, playing under DeMeco Ryans will probably give him the opportunity to develop into a far better linebacker than he'd probably become playing for any other team. So I like the pick. I like it a lot. this next pick, now there was points before the Joe Mixon trade, before free agency. There was points where you could ask any Texans fan, "What's the biggest need on the team? What do you think the team needs?" And the answer would be running back or offensive line, depending on how well you knew the depth chart. So this next pick, Jawhar Jordan, out of Louisville, and I'll tell you this: I can name two running backs, Isaac Guardo and Jarvis Brownlee Jr., I believe, that were from Louisville, that were in this draft, that were picked before Jawhar Jordan. That being said, after watching Jawhar Jordan play, I'm wondering why he wasn't the higher pick at running back for Louisville. And I think it's because now this is what I read. I need to contextualize it, so I could be wrong. But Jawhar Jordan, I believe, is a little on the older end. Most of these picks the Texans have made so far are like 20 and 21-year-olds that will have plenty of time to develop into their ability to play football. But Jawhar Jordan, at a position that age really matters at, is already on the later end of that spectrum. But like I said earlier, this is a guy, one of my favorite picks. Here, Houston Stresson said it. He tweeted out 2020 steal of the 2024 draft, and so he obviously has a lot of confidence in himself. I already have a lot of confidence in him, and I've seen one highlight reel. I'm just like, this guy. I think he ran a 4.5 40, but like regularly ran a 4.3 before that. He was just injured, and so I'm excited to see him get on the field. Now, the question is, do you think that he slots as RB2 or RB3? I'm going RB3 right now, and I assume you're probably going to follow me on that one. But what are your thoughts on the pick and where he slots on the roster?
I mean, I understand.
Jarvis was a corner. Dang it.
I understand all the hype. I saw some of the videos. I understand where Stressens is coming from. I just don't understand it for the Texans. I don't see a scenario where this guy gets on the field. And for me, that's like, I don't know. I mean, unless you're going to tell me that Dari is going to get cut, unless you're going to tell me that Pierce is going to get cut, one of those guys is going to get cut. And then you got to compete with one of those guys to get time. Like Joe Mixon was drafted to be was not drafted. I'm sorry. He was traded for it to be the dude. So I don't understand. And then Pierce, I feel like they're not done with Pierce. I would be surprised if they were done with Pierce. If they were, I think they would have already moved on from him and tried to get something for him as opposed to just cutting him. So say for argument's sake, they cut Dari or say they carry 4 running backs, and say they decide, okay, Dari is going to be special teams only. All right, cool. I still, with this high powered as the passing game is going to be, with the 20 carries that you're talking about for Mixon, where on earth are you going to find time to get Jawhar Jordan on the football field?
Jawhar Jordan primarily will slot as kickoff return or punt return. I think that's so. At least in college, he had 2 99 100-yard returns. I think his biggest threat is third down back. I think that now that being said, Joe Mixon is an every down back, so it'd have to be a third down that Joe Mixon was just too gassed to play. But I could definitely see him stepping in and taking a screen, maybe taking I more specifically like on a 3rd and 13 where the Texans are just going to run the ball and see what happens. They might throw Jawhar Jordan out there and see what he's got. But yeah, Jawhar Jordan's only 2 years younger than Saquon Barkley, so he's a little on the older side. So if the Texans saw his potential and want to realize it, they'll probably have to give him play time sooner rather than later. I could see that the Texans could carry 4 running backs on the roster. I don't know how likely that is, but it's possible. But at the end of the day, I think primarily he'll slot in as a special teamer, at least initially. So the other option is, it's been brought up in the chat on Instagram, is what if they trade Pierce? And so I think what we're going to see, if that's on the table, could be, could not be. Not saying I have any sources that say that's likely or not, just hypothetical scenario. If the Texans like what they see from Jawhar Jordan in training camp, and they're like, okay, we're going to roll with him, better fit for the scheme. Dameon Pierce still isn't getting it, right? They hit up Dallas. Dallas did nothing at running back in the draft. They just absolutely they picked up Ezekiel Elliott, so they obviously still have a need at the position. You pick up Dallas and you say, hey, 4th round pick, 5th round pick, something like that. Something, either what you spent on him or a pick back. Be like, hey, this guy fits a lot better in your scheme. This guy had a really great rookie year. He just doesn't really fit our scheme. We're trying to get some return on investment. We think you guys could really use him. And then you send Dameon Pierce over there for that pick. Yeah, even a 6th rounder. I mean, just something in return if you're not going to bring him back. And then, as much as I love Dameon Pierce, I'd love to see him stay on the roster. I think that he brings a different dynamic from Joe Mixon and from Jawhar Jordan that would make this running back room better. But hypothetically, if they decide to move on, I think that they give a call up north to that city that's just northwest of Houston and say, hey, what's up?
Now here's my argument to that. And I would have been all on board if they would have made this happen 2 weeks ago before the draft. After the draft, you really don't have the leverage. Now all these teams, they can go undrafted. They can go get a running back from anywhere, right? Dameon Pierce is not like somebody that anybody's going to value, in my opinion, more than we would right now. The value at him is at his lowest because of how bad he played last year. People looked at that season and go, what is he to me that I couldn't get from undrafted guy from Clemson or whatever? You know what I mean? So if they were going to find value for him, it would have been before the draft. So that team can go, look, that's a pick we don't have to make. Now that you have other teams that have already went out and done stuff, I think if the Cowboys were going to go add another running back and they were going to do it, they would have did it before they got Ezekiel Elliott. Like, I don't think they added him with the idea that, oh, this is the answer. No, he's just another, a role guy. They're gonna committee it, and maybe he can be the short yardage guy, whatever. But Dameon Pierce is basically in a lot of people's mind what Ezekiel Elliott is: one cut and go. Not a vision guy, just a hammer, finds contact, however you want to describe him. That's why he's such a perfect fit for the Cowboys, because he looks so much like what they're accustomed to. But I think they already went out and got that answer in Ezekiel Elliott. I just don't think you're going to be able to find a trade partner. And I think, like, if you cut him, I mean, you can. If Jawhar Jordan shows up and preseason just lights the world on fire, then you can, absolutely. I just don't know if you want to take a guy that's been in your system now for 2 years, or this will be his 2nd year, and go, we're going to teach this new kid all over again, and he's going to have the same problems that Dameon had the year before.
I mean, yeah, I agree with you. I do think there's at least one team in the league that would give up a 5th or 6th round pick to see what Dameon Pierce can do sometime early, like in the preseason or right before preseason, if the Texans have made that decision at that point. But I think that the later in the offseason we get, the less likely it is that the Texans are even considering moving on from him. And unfortunately for Dameon, that'll probably just be a topic that's discussed until then and through then, and until he's either not on the team or has performed better. I don't know. What about LASIK? Let's get him LASIK. Let's start a GoFundMe to get Dameon Pierce LASIK. For all I know, he'd just be more efficient at seeking the contact, but we'll see. No, I'm kidding. Next pick in the draft, since we've talked about running back, let's do it. Let's look at the next pick, which is Solomon Byrd, a defensive end from USC. And I know what everyone's thinking: why a defensive end? The defensive end room is doing so well. And to that, I'll say, I think Solomon Byrd is the perfect pick. One, you can never have too many pass rushers to choose from. If he doesn't make the roster, which I doubt, watching him play, I don't think that's really in the cards, but who knows? But I think that he could bring some tail end depth to this edge rush that kind of would be not, I wouldn't say it was needed per se. No one was like, we need more edge rushers. This room is dying for an edge rusher, but I think it's welcomed. But how do you feel about the pick of an edge in the 7th round?
I think anywhere that you get talent that you feel that you can train up, cultivate, I think that's good. I don't know what else they needed. You know what I mean? So this clearly screams depth. They addressed depth all throughout. I mean, yeah, defensive tackle was this big glaring, hey, DT, DT, DT. But I think edge, it doesn't hurt. I don't know exactly how much he'll make the roster. I mean, anything sixth, seventh at this point in the draft, it's a lottery pick really, and you're just kind of seeing, hey, I get him into training camp, he really fits. He looks like he's gonna mesh well with the guys, that kind of thing, or maybe he gets cut. Maybe he's a practice squad guy, something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, this more so. So there's 3 7th round picks, and I would say 2 of the 3 of them was just kind of like, yeah, we like this guy. We'll take a shot on him. Not necessarily position in need, but we'll bring him in, see what happens. The next pick was Marcus Harris, defensive tackle out of Auburn, all SEC, 11.5 tackles for a loss, just a dominant force that you wouldn't think with that resume would be available in the 7th round. And it's interesting to see the Texans wait until then to address that because defensive tackle was viewed as such a large need for the team. What I'll say is this: I think Nick meant what he said when he said that this team's ready to play before the draft because defensive tackle is a rotational position, and the Texans have all of the pieces individually in that room to rotate and fit what they need between run stuffers for early downs, Danico Autry stepping into defensive tackle in the later downs. So I don't mind waiting until now to make this pick, especially understanding that Nick tried to make it earlier in the draft. And then, obviously, like I said, all SEC, just a guy who was a dominant force in college. I don't think it's a bad pickup, and I think he's definitely an early candidate to outperform his draft stock. But how do you feel about it, Tom?
I was waiting. I felt like DT was going to be the first thing they went out and got. So for it to be one of the last things that they went out and got, I was really surprised. That the bird thing about can he play inside too? That may be something. That
I think I saw something that said he could.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure I saw something that said he could.
So if you already have that, then this is more depth. I think that we'll see. Obviously, everybody wants Pro Bowlers at every spot, right? But you can't necessarily do that. So hopefully that whatever reason this guy slid doesn't show up on the field or doesn't show up in the streets or whatever. I hope that this guy is somebody that, I don't know, people didn't think highly of. Texans took him, and now it's like, how did this guy make it to the 7th round? I don't know. Like Stresson said, Jason Braddock had him as a day 2, I think, or day 3 guy. So for them to get him in the 7th was just crazy.
No, yeah, and Jason Braddock's track record with predicting talent levels makes me extra excited about this pick. Now, one thing I'll say too is and this showed up. A lot of Titans fans were frustrated with the T'Vondre Sweat pick. One specific Titans fan, Locked On Titans host Tyler Rowland. That was a whole thing. I follow enough people in the Titans fandom that I got to watch that whole thing unfold. He spoke really strongly about how much he didn't like that pick. And I mean, the valid point he made is that T'Vondre Sweat on the excessive end of the spectrum is a larger player who will likely only ever play an average of like 35 plays a game, maybe 1 or 2 downs per set of downs. And so to pick him and to spend such a high draft pick on a player who might see the field for like less than a significant amount less than half the game is a lot to ask. So obviously I would expect Marcus Harris to do a little more than that, and we spent a 7th round pick on him. So I think overall huge win to get him that late as a rotation player. It's a rotation position. Even the best defensive tackles maybe play a full drive every once in a while. They still rotate. There's still guys that go in. That's a position that rotates very heavily. Most of the defense does that outside of the secondary, even the secondary. Really, the whole I'm going to stop talking. I feel like I'm rambling now. But anyway.
The chat's killing it. I dig the chat. The chat's like, tighten up, baby. Titan's going to tighten. I totally agree. I mean, we both like T'Vondre Sweat. All our mocks we did. Longhorn guys, both of us. I mean, you can see the Longhorn in the background. We're rooting hard for that guy. That being
Oh yeah,
said,
100%.
we
I would
never
have loved
had
to have
him.
taken him at 38, no doubt.
Yeah, we never had him, as high as they took him. But I don't know. I mean, the fact that Locked On just went all the way in
He
and
went
was
all
like,
the way in.
this guy's a party animal. And I mean, just undressed him. Like,
Dude, I've expressed strong opinions, but I must say, it was someone with such a large following. I was surprised. I'm not surprised. He's a very passionate fan, and he felt the need to express that opinion harshly. But I mean, that was just really hard to go in. Very immediate emotional reaction, and I would have probably given myself 5 minutes to think about it before filming myself saying all that. But anyways, enough about the Titans because this isn't a Titans podcast. Yeah, got a DUI. I mean, we're all rooting for T'Vondre Sweat. And Stressens brings up a good point. 1 minute, here he is. That it was debunked. He plays similar, but even if he plays similar, like I said, his average snaps are going to be not not on the higher end relative to other defensive positions. Spending a high draft pick on defensive tackle in general, you have to really have a need for a guy who's like a staple at the position. And we have a very significant rotation. So I mean, yeah, I wasn't like incredibly worried about it. And I do think that Sweat will lose the weight. He's lost the weight before to, but we're done talking about T'Vondre Sweat. Okay, this is a Texans podcast.
non-draft pick.
T'Vondre Sweat is toast this coming season. Two times a season for the significant future because he's gonna have to face the Texans, and that offense is gonna cook. So not worried about T'Vondre Sweat messing up what is the Texans offense. Definitely a reach though. But that being said, anyway, I'm catching. I'm trying to guys. I'm trying to pull out. I'm trying to pull out. Let me go into another. um. So the Texans have one more pick in the draft, and it was Ladarius Henderson. This was the offensive tackle pick. I thought Blake Fisher was going to be in the second round. So as I said earlier, I thought the Texans were going to go guard in the third at the earliest, and then tackle in the fourth at the earliest. But if you're going tackle in the second, it might as well be a guy who's versatile, who could possibly flex into guard, so that you're getting the best of both worlds. Maybe it's a guy you just really like. Because in my mind, when I'm looking at the offensive line, I'm like, Kenyon Green, can he perform? If he doesn't, what's the backup plan? Kendrick Green. And I'm like going through and like, okay, well, the most important thing is having a guard who can step in case all of those contingencies don't work. Because to me, the rest of the offensive line is set in its own way. But I guess especially now with the pick of Blake Fisher. So this is the pick I thought they were going to make. This guy actually has some guard experience. He's actually listed as a guard on some websites, but I think he primarily played tackle this past season. But Ladarius Henderson out of Michigan, offensive lineman. How do you feel about the pick, Tom?
Anytime you take a guy from a Power 5 conference, I feel like they are always going to stack up just a little bit better to get him that late. I think obviously Michigan scored a ton of points. I feel like that was an offense that ran the ball well. This is a team that wants to run the ball. As much as we see the offense look like it's just going to throw the ball all over the yard, I do believe when a lot of people say that the primary goal will be to run the football effectively and get, 15 to 20 carries a game if you can between your two running backs. So I don't have any issue at all with the pick. Clearly, it looks like depth. You hope that Kenyon Green is the guy. This is a guy they spent a first round premium draft pick on. So you hope that hits. But if for some reason you need this guy to play, I hope he plays well.
100%, 100%. I mean, if you look at it, the Texans starting offensive line is there. So this is just, if I'm looking at the college you went to, I'm thinking Michigan. I mean, if I'm looking at Michigan, I'm looking at every player that's not JJ McCarthy and going, what did they do? Because that offense seemed to hum in a way that made JJ McCarthy look good. But no, yeah. I mean, I'm 100% in on this pick. This was about where I expected him to do it, like I said. So like the shock of seeing Blake Fisher be the name called was almost as shocking as seeing the Texans pick at the picks that they had in the second round instead of moving around literally at all. to try and acquire a different set. Like, so I don't like looking at the past like this, but like for example, players that I really liked that would have been available if the Texans had traded up 3 or 4 picks. Which, looking back, the premium on trading up in the second round was high. So I was using a value chart when I was making my proposed trades for mock drafts, and people were saying at first before the draft they were saying you're paying too much. You can probably move up with a fourth round pick, and then we watched teams trade up like 6 or 8 spots in the second round and pay a second round pick, like on top of the pick they traded in order to move up. So I feel like that's probably why Nick decided he looked at the board and was like, I can stand pat and I can either get a cornerback or a defensive tackle. So I'll do that. But I mean, moving up 2 spots, they could have gotten Johnny Newton out of Illinois, which would have been great. But like I said, still super happy with the way the draft turned out. Tom, the last thing I want to talk about with the draft is your grade. And now I say it that like this because like I've given my grade and I'll say it here too. But I mean, I guess we'll give the grade and then we'll talk about undrafted free agents briefly. But we're not draft experts, so and what I'll say is this:
Not
Howie
yet.
Roseman, yeah, not yet. Howie Roseman of the Eagles tends to get an A, and what I've noticed is that he and this is pointed out to me by other people, not myself, but he tends to just pick the guys that everyone's high on. So like guys like us, guy experts set this opinion that fans follow, and then GMs don't listen to them because the GM is the GM. But Howie Roseman's like, I told Jeremiah to take Jalen Hylix off his list because I was worried he was going to. I'm like, not a single GM in the NFL is looking at Daniel Jeremiah's list to get who they should draft. I know this because of the way the draft went. But in your not expert, humble opinion, what was your grade of the Texans draft this year?
So I wanted to give them a better grade because I really feel like they got good players. I just feel like in an instance where they could really capitalize on having CJ Stroud, young CJ Stroud on a cheap contract, they could have made the trades that you said that the premiums were too high. You know, Jacob Ayers stole my grade. B minus. B minus. Good, great call.
I'm just
Great
gonna
mind.
say it. He's ruined
B minus.
it.
No, it's good. That's good. I love it. Because
Nick
while
Wright
they got
was
good,
who I was referencing. Nick Wright, that's who it was. He's the one who said it.
I don't know that I love Nick Wright all the time.
That's why I was hesitant to say it, but I did agree with what he said.
But I think they got great players, but I think they could have got better players had they have been a little bit more committed to making the trades. While I like some of the picks they made in the 6th, 7th round, stuff like that, I would have gladly given those picks up to get Johnny Newton, to get Kool-Aid if you thought Kool-Aid was the guy. You know, if you really feel like you needed the outside guy as opposed to the nickel guy that we think Kamari might be, I don't know, maybe he still can play outside, but I think with the speed question, which I don't think is a question, but maybe we see it, maybe we don't. You could have went up and got Kool-Aid if everybody said Kool-Aid was the pick, and everybody saying Kool-Aid was one of the best corners, and he was there. So I think they could have done better, but I'm not mad at what they got, and B minus is my pick. I agree. Stresses Nick wrong all the time.
I feel you. At first he said Nick wrong, and I was like, Nick Caserio doesn't. But then I'm like, Nick Wright, Nick wrong. Got it.
Yes.
As the joke, you know. But anyways, I kind of agree with you. I mean, I feel like there was better picks that could have made moving around, but that's the fan in me wanting the Texans to like really go all out and like move up and grab these higher level talents. But they've got their guys, they did their research, and they got who they wanted. So the way I'd say it is it's a B plus for me, but I think that 100% that over time that grade will go up. Like it's hard to grade it right now and say like, oh, well, yeah, B plus, that's 100. Like someone tweeted out, they were like, if you want to grade a draft, grade the 2021 draft. Because that's like, we know enough about that to know, but like just because like I said, the reason I brought up Howie Roseman and him generally tending to go with the experts is that the Eagles will always get an A plus on their draft because he tends to go with the experts. But Nick Wright brought it up, you know, all that talent, all those players that made their drafts impressive, have any of them contributed on the field over the past 2 or 3 years? Not significantly. You got what Jalen Carter, Nolan Ryan, or not Nolan Ryan, Nolan. What's that linebacker from Georgia? Dang it, I can't. I'm thinking Nolan Ryan, or Keely Ringo, the cornerback they also got from that draft. It's just like who looks back at those drafts right now and says, yeah, A plus, totally. So, and I agree with Guava that the Texans had an A plus free agency, which is why they didn't need to have an A plus draft. That's Nolan Ryan playing the Eagles now. Jeez, I'm sorry. Houston's in my blood. I'm just, I said Nolan, and the next word was Ryan. That's just how it goes. But yeah, when you now looking at the Texans off season so far as a whole, we're looking at an A plus, just because of all the moves they've made with players lost, players added. This team got better. This team is going to put Nolan Smith. Thank you. I once again was stressing, but now I'm blessing. Thanks for being in the chat. Yeah, so I mean, we're going to look at the draft right now, and our grades are going to be based off the lens we have of like, well, this player was graded this way, and you drafted him too early or too late. But like, give it a year or two for these players to show if their grade was even worth what they are worth on the field. That's what I'll say about it. But yeah, let's talk about undrafted free agents for a second. The Texans didn't add very many because they don't have very many roster slots. I think they added 6, including some twins out of their Jackrabbits. So North Dakota State, I believe, is or maybe it's South Dakota State. I don't remember which one's which. They're FCS. Some twin wide receivers, British Robinson, a running back out of UNC, linebacker out of Penn State, another linebacker from somewhere else. And yeah, I mean, I think that the Texans obviously know from experience that Arian Foster, being, who he was, that undrafted can be GOAT level material. I mean, I'll say it now. I think Arian Foster should 100% at least be considered by the Texans for the Ring of Honor. Not the most popular opinion that I have, but it's there. I have it. He's expressed interest in coming back to the organization. But looking at these undrafted free agents, I think the ones that have the lowest chance of making the roster are probably the Janke twins, mainly because they're wide receivers. And if that was the Texans' way of addressing wide receiver, it would take Hutchinson or Mechie just not performing for them to make the roster. But I think that the linebackers definitely have a chance, and the running back does. But I don't know. Do you know enough about the undrafted free agents to have a strong opinion?
No, not really. I saw some video on the twins, and it didn't look bad. I just really wonder, like, all right, say you only need one wide receiver, who you cutting? If you have to choose between the twins, who you cutting? So
it's like having Giannis and Giannis.
Yeah, I don't know how you do it. We'll see. It's all of those are even more lottery tickets in the 6th and 7th round, right? Yeah, sometimes they hit, sometimes they don't make it out of preseason. The interesting thing when you were talking about grading drafts is you don't have to look that far back. Last year, they talked about the Texans trading to get the number 4 pick the number 3 pick to get Will Anderson was so bad, and the draft was so bad, and I
bookmarked some of those tweets this year to use after
they traded a probably a top 5 pick away to get a dude that needs to be X level good, and he's not going to be that good, and now everybody's walking that back. Nick Wrong was at the top of that. Now they're all walking that back. The Texans look like geniuses because what they traded away the number 26 pick for a top 4 talent. So,
man, I love that trade. After everything played out, that trade was amazing. Let's see. A former All-Pro head coach and former Patriots dynasty member picking players. I trust their judgment. I agree with you. The IVth. I don't even know how you say that. That's probably Roman numerals. So the 4th. There we go. Glad Tank Dell is okay. We didn't bring up Tank Dell. I'm not one to try and use something like that as video material for clout because I genuinely am, concerned and care about Tank Dell's health. But I mean, I'll take a second to say, I'm glad Tank Dell's okay. I'm not going to be the one to step up and tell him who he needs to hang out with and how he's spending his time. This is a time to be glad that that security guard was right there, took out the gunman. You watch the videos and see how close he was to all that stuff. I mean, there was a lot of different ways that that shooting could have gone, but Tank Dell left the hospital within a few hours and is back in Houston. So, I mean, we're blessed as Texans fans to have him back in Houston, getting ready to get back into the swing of things. Tank Dell is blessed to be alive. Everyone who was at that party is blessed to be alive. And so, I mean, I'm thankful. Thank God that he was, able to make it out of that, and then he's on the other side of it. Anything to say on your end, Tom?
Yeah. The one thing, I mean, obviously thankful that everybody's okay and that Tank Dell's already back in Houston, in and out of the facility, like Streston's talking about. The one thing that I think was really good that came from this that I hope he takes to heart is that I don't know if you saw the thing that Ocho Cinco did with what's his name? Gosh, I'm bad with names right now.
With Shannon Sharpe.
Yes. And he said he reached out to him. And the one thing that I loved is that Ocho flat out told him, hey, you got to move differently. And, for him to hear that from a guy that's walked the same path and just look, I know you're out there. It's off season. You're supposed to, hanging out with your friends, but you just got to know that not everybody in that room has your best interest at heart, and that you got to take care of you to be able to provide for your family and stuff like that. And for him to get that from Ocho, I think is some of the most valuable advice he could get, not just from somebody on the outside that's, just yapping at him, as opposed to an actual player in his position who's been to the top that can say, look, man, this is what you got to do to take care of you.
Yeah, no, not just some boomer on the internet who's like, that's how it is out there in Florida. You should come back and hang out in Texas instead. Or whatever. But I mean, I agree. I think coming from not coming from you or me, coming from Chad Ochocinco, 100% where it should be coming from. So yeah, like I said, I'm glad that he is out on the other side of that, back in the facility. It means it's probably super minor, and it's a blessing, 100%. Guys, there's a lot of questions coming into the chat, but we've been at it for an hour and 12 minutes. So there's plenty of off season, plenty of lives from the bullpen, whether they're late night or just normal. We'll see in the future. Tom is on the PSF app covering the Astros, which is why we got a late start. A little bit of a heartbreaker today, but we're not stressing it. The Astros are going to come out on top. A lot of good things to take from it. So if you want to follow the Astros in that way, PSF's a really great app to interact with fans like Tom while the game's going on. Creates that atmosphere where you can bounce your sports takes off the chat, have a nice fun discussion. So it's a good time. As we bring it to a close, I've been James Roy. This has been Tom. Tom is at Third Coast Tom on Twitter, and he is at TCTom1 on Instagram, which is not private anymore. It's a public Instagram account. You can follow him, and he doesn't have the right to tell you no. As it stands, who knows? Maybe after 100 followers, he'll turn it back to private. Following back everyone who likes this until 100 followers. I don't know. And then I am at M1 Texans fan. You find me at that on all of the websites. On YouTube is where the podcast is hosted for video. And additionally, on the Bleacher Report app, you can find me at that. That's the best way. I just got put on the Bleacher Report app to start doing live streams about the Texans. So Monday we'll be talking a very similar topic, a little 30-minute chat at noon. So if you're interested in that, download the Bleacher Report app and sign up. Follow me so that you can hear the latest in Texans talk from the Bleacher Report. This has been the Bullpen. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening to us talk about the Texans as long as we did. And thanks for contributing to the conversation. Much appreciate anyone who made any contribution to this conversation, because that makes this even more fun than it already is. Until next time, thanks for hanging out with us. Stay classy, Houston, and Vamos Texans.